Hey, hi, I'm Bill Boggs, and your video is going to start in a second, but I want to tell you about my new satirical novel, The Adventures of Spike the Wonder Dog, about a very funny canine who becomes a television star. It takes you behind the scenes of TV talk shows like you're watching here. Pre-order The Adventures of Spike the Wonder Dog on Amazon today. Spike and I thank you.
That's right.
And because that's the way they did him in those days, and I said that was fine.
Yeah.
And then they said, we may use you again, because Rocky likes the idea of having a wife. Makes him more human, which was one of his marvelous qualities. And I said, shall I leave next week open? 5 years.
You know, if I could find a girl like you, I'd marry her, Mrs. King.
Well, it certainly won't do you any harm.
Huh?
That was all good, nourishing food. It'll never hurt you.
I suppose it will.
Do you remember when we were in the Ambassador Theater? I ran out into the street with a drawn gun, and this cop was standing there with a gun on me?
Yes.
Because nobody had told the precinct that we were going to use the street? By the time we got the murders all wrapped up, and the criminals were taken away, and the fingerprints were done, we were ready for the commercial.
That's right. What, dear? Certainly it's the fastest effervescent in the headache field. Yeah, I'm going to have some myself, dear. You betcha. What? Oh, yes, honey. Yes, dear. I'll be right home. Mm-hmm. Just a few minutes. Goodbye, dear. Wonderful girl, that Mabel. Wonderful drink, this bromo seltzer.
Many of the programs of the 50s were not so innocuous. It was the time of the Korean War, the Berlin Wall, the time of Senator Joe McCarthy, and a real fear among segments of the general public about the influence of communism. Some television dramas echoed these feelings. One of the most technically inventive series in this time of live television on any network was On Location, which traveled to actual settings all over the New York area to use as background for their dramas. This action takes place in the Sherwin-Williams paint factory in Newark, where the ex-boyfriend of the hero's sweetheart has, for revenge, accused our hero of being a commie.
A commie agent, yeah. You heard? Yeah. You think I'm bullying you, huh?
Years before The Twilight Zone, Rod Serling wrote of the dilemma of a Czech national, now an American citizen, asked to help his mother country.
So if you don't mind...
It must take considerable practice to throw these knives. Practice, application, cool nerves.
Yes. Very much the same requirements as being a spy.
My thanks, comrade.
You know, I don't know how you feel about it, but one of the things that appealed to me about live television was the fact that it seemed to combine the positive aspects of the stage and camera, in that you had the ongoing thing of the stage, where you start to develop a scene and you build and you build and you build, with the intimacy of the camera, which could get in. You could play very subtly, you could see your eyes, you wouldn't have to, you know, project to the back of a 1,000-seat house.
But I also remember that live, I was scared to death.
Oh, we all were.
Most of the time.
Sure.
I once played a prison chaplain who had to cross the prison yard with a prisoner. Robert Duvall was the prisoner. They'd break up something, and as I crossed the prison yard, the prison wall fell in. So those things happened. Those were among the joys of life.
Yeah, the golden days.
The golden days. One of the series which was literally golden for New York actors was Colonel Humphrey Flack. The Colonel, played by Alan MOWBRAY, who was assisted by Frank Jenks, was a lovable rogue who conned the con men and swindled the swindlers, and in the process used dozens of fine actors.
What? Swindled out of Captain Carpenter in order to get the inheritance for himself.
Garvey, is this true?
I ain't talking.
J. Flack. Martin Balsam.
Flack and Company, huh?
You've heard of us, of course?
Of course. Well, I get a chance.
Louis Nye.
A lot of losers, of course. I tell them, you never hear of a horse betting on a man, do you?
Margaret Hamilton.
Colonel, plaque and companion.
We'd like a two-room suite, Miss,
Mrs. Lewis.
Mrs. Lewis.
I can give you 2 adjoining rooms.
With private bath, of course.
The bath is private. You shut the door. There's some of the boys getting in the mood for Pioneers Day. Black 10 on the red jacket.
Yes, I know.
Pioneer Day?
Yes, tomorrow.
Gene
To celebrate the founding of the town. Oh, it's just a chance for everybody to get the Wild West out of their systems.
I know that lady. Infant television was an excellent training ground for actors, writers, and directors. And a source of work for the West Coast film people as well.
But many of the East Coast live dramas were not put on film, or the kidneys have been lost, and so the performances.
Fortunately, one of the most exciting series of Metromedia's early days was recorded. It was the Festival of the Performing Arts, produced by David Susskind. Now for a few brief excerpts of superb acting.
Like most Midwesterners, I have never had any but the vaguest race prejudice. I always had a secret yen for the lovely Scandinavian blondes who sat on porches in St. Paul, but hadn't emerged economically to be part of what was then society. They were too nice to be called chickens, and too quickly off the farmlands to seize a place in the sun. But I remember going round blocks to catch a glimpse of shining hair, the bright shock of a girl I'd never known.
James Joyce's Ulysses. Bloom fantasizes about his youth. He tries to recapture a bit of it. I was in my teens, a growing boy. A little then sufficed, a jolting car, the mingling odors of the ladies' cloakrooms, the throng pent tight on the old royal stairs, for they love crushes, instincts of the herd, and the dark sex-smelling theaters, unbridled vice, and then the heat. There were sunspots that summer, end of school and tipsy cake. Halcyon days. I was precocious. Youth, the fawns. I sacrificed to the god of the forest, the flowers that bloom in the spring. It was parent time. Capillary attraction is a natural phenomenon. Lottie Clark, flaxen-haired. I saw her at night toilet through ill-closed curtains with poor Papa's opera glasses. She rolled downhill a Trialto bridge to tempt me with a flow of animal spirits. She climbed a crooked tree and I, a saint, couldn't resist. A demon possessed me. Besides, who saw? Done.
The new Grand Union Price Finder for specials contains all the specials in the store, hundreds of them. Here's a sample. Lipton Tea Bags, 100 count, only $1.49 with coupon. Post Raisin Bran, 20-ounce box, just $1.59. Aunt Jemima Original Pancake Mix, 2-pound box, 79 cents. With this new price finder for specials, you won't miss specials or have to wait for weekly food ads. It's a new way to shop for bargains only at Grand Union.
Every weeknight at 9, New York Telephone lowers its rates 35%, which makes life in New York a lot more livable.
I can't live without you. I can't smile without you. I can't laugh and I can't sing.
35% lower rates after 9 p.m. Now, what could make life in New York more livable than that? New York lives on New York Telephone.
Stick 'em here, stick 'em there. New Pampers, refasten anywhere. New Pampers now have refastenable tapes. Easy to use refastenable tapes that stick anywhere, over and over again. It makes checking your baby's diapers simple, quick, and easy. Stick 'em here. Stick 'em there. New Pampers refasten everywhere. New Pampers, now with refastenable tapes. It's really easy, isn't it? Huh?
The excitement of television can be measured and remembered by events and the programs of the particular decade. And the decade of the 60s was exhilarating and terrible in America. John Kennedy was elected and assassinated. It was a faraway war. There were anti-war marches on Washington. There were wrongs in the land and civil rights marches to put the wrongs right. Hoover, Eisenhower, and Churchill died. A singing group called the Beatles was born. There was a far-out ending to the decade as the first men walked on the moon. What a lot to talk about. And for television, besides covering all these events, the decade of the 60s was also the time to talk about them.
Just before we came on the air, I said to Betty Furness, Betty, I'm becoming an old-timer myself. I've been doing this 10 years, and you looked at me like I'm still a rookie.
You are. You're a nice kid. And you're going to be all right when you have a little experience.
Let me review, in case somebody just landed from another city. Betty Furness is a Channel 4 consumer reporter, but she was here on a program, I don't know which year, which was called Fashions Coming and Going.
Fashions Coming and Becoming.
Oh, Coming and Becoming. Yeah. And you were known as Nancy
Dixon.
Why Nancy Dixon?
Well, it was a sponsored program. It was 1945. It was sponsored by Sanforized, which was a process that was used to keep cotton from shrinking. And Sanforized had a name like Betty Crocker. It was Nancy Dixon. So I was Nancy Dixon.
And Clay, you're a publisher. You're not really a television personality, but you hosted one really memorable show here.
It was called The Friends Of, yeah. And the various people came on, and mine was The Friends of Clay Felker. And I had a lot of very talkative, contentious people.
Joyce Davison Susskind is a former host of The Joyce Davison Show, also the former co-host of PM East with Mike Wallace. And Skitch Henderson we know as a fine musician, conductor of the New York Pops, former host of the Skitch Henderson's New York. Let's talk working conditions, Betty. Back in 1945, what was it like to be in television then?
I tell you what it was, basically was hot.
Yes.
Especially the show that I did on Channel 5, because it was Dumont at the time. It wasn't in a studio. It was done in an office building over on Madison Avenue and 53rd Street. And the lights were just at ceiling height. And it was so hot that we wore bandanas and heavy makeup and dark glasses to rehearse. And one day I said, this is really too hot. And I brought a room thermometer from home and I laid it on the table, which was considerably lower than my head. And the thermometer was broken at 132 within 5 minutes. Wow. And my head was closer to the lights than that.
The reason was that the cameras, the primitive early television cameras, needed to have all this intense light.
Enormous amount of light.
By the time I got to Channel 5, the climate for talk shows had changed some, but there was one similarity. Up to a few years ago, at least, almost all of the talk and information shows had a resident conductor, an orchestra conductor, or a band of some kind. I was lucky because I had the resident maestro of my show was Mr. Joe Raposo, great composer, talented pianist, nice man.
Did you think, Skitch, that, because you had that, wonderful experience on the Tonight Show, so close to Carson and everyone else?
Everybody else, yeah, because I started it with
that
Steve.
You kind of got it, it was Steve Allen, right? That you were kind of getting it by osmosis, that you had learned to do it just by watching them?
Well, I thought because I knew the technical side, that I knew the aesthetic side. And I found out I didn't, I found out you get your head handed to you every day, I think, sitting in your chair. I found myself coming to work every day thinking, oh, God, what will I do wrong today? When I did begin to get comfortable, they let me go.
By the late 60s, the studio gave way to location with a gentleman who is now certainly on location, Gene Rayburn.
1969 it was when we were the very first of the reality programs. And it happened mainly because someone finally invented a small, lightweight handheld camera. And we used it to explore the people and neighborhoods of New York. We used New York City as a background. We were the very first of the reality shows.
Start playing, please.
This is called the United Nations Barber Shop. I guess because it's just a couple of blocks from the United Nations, right, Tom?
1 block.
1 block, yeah. You get any diplomats who come in here?
Well, I tell you, we have a lot of delegates and different ambassadors. We had Goldbergs when he had his job here.
Yes.
And we get them from all over the world. Yes.